Hi, I'm Tim Moffat. In my group, I'll be doing listening styles. So I'll go ahead and start explaining what I'm going to do. I'll be defining and explaining the listening styles a little more in the final project. But for now, this is what I've been working on. So listening styles. Your listening style is your preferred way of making sense out of the messages that you hear. Some people prefer to focus on facts and to analyze information. Others are more interested in focusing on feelings and emotions that are expressed when trying to actively listen to what the message sender is attempting to convey. The relational listening style is for people who prefer to listen to people's expressions of their emotions and feelings. These listeners search for common interests and seek to empathize with the feelings of others. They're attempting to connect via the sentiments and passions that other people are expressing. Relational-oriented listeners are less apprehensive when communicating with others in small groups and interpersonal relationships. These listeners are less anxious about interacting with others and are far more likely to voice concern when necessary. Also, they tend to be more assertive listeners. Relational listeners are more empathetic and can understand the thoughts and feelings of others more easily than some other listening styles. Next, we have the analytical listeners. The analytical listeners focus on facts and tend to withhold judgment before reaching specific conclusions. They generally consider all sides of an issue before making decisions or reaching a conclusion. Also, analytical listeners tend to hear the entire message before reaching conclusions. Apparently, they would make fantastic judges. In order to further help analyzation of a message, they tend to take the position of the person they're listening to in order to help suspend judgment, which is nice. Also, analytical listeners prefer well-organized information so that they can clearly and easily analyze all the information. They're fact-based and well-focused on those when listening to an emotional, personal story. So, very analytical people. Critical listeners are good at evaluating the information that they hear. They hone in on inconsistencies that people say while speaking. They're very comfortable listening to detailed, complex information and focusing on the facts, yet are especially adept at picking out and focusing on inconsistencies in the stories, so they would be more like a detective. Critical listeners are also likely to catch errors in overall logic and reasoning that is being used in order to reach a conclusion. This makes them a bit more skeptical than relational listeners, and this is called second guessing, which I'm sure no one likes. Task-oriented listeners are interested in focusing more on achieving specific outcomes or accomplishing tasks than the communication relationship when listening to others. So they basically want to get down to the meat of the story, figure out what's going on, and they are not concerned with your emotions at all, which I can respect. Their emphasis is on completing a specific transaction, such as problem solving, taking actions, finishing some sort of interaction at a store, that sort of thing. These listeners focus on verbs, specifically what needs to be done, which makes sense because a verb is an action word. So if they want a task, they're task-oriented, they want to get to the meat of the matter, they need to hear how we're going to do it. They're not big fans of rambling, descriptive messages that they see as having no point. Get to the meat of the matter. What's the crux of the situation? They like short, concise, well-organized, fact-based messages so they can focus on the outcomes. For them, communication should serve a purpose. It's not just to talk. Why are we talking? What's the next step? It's very important to understand what your listening style is in order for you to know how to communicate. Because if you are not adept at knowing what your style is, you might come off as short with people who are very analytical if you're, with relational people if you are a critical listener. Get to the point and they want to tell you everything else. So it's very, very important to understand who you are in this whole realm. I'll expand on it further when we get farther into the project, but for now, my job was to explain, sort of define the different listening styles, and then expand on it. So I've gotten this far. I will be expanding on it further, and I'll also be expanding on the definition of the styles and give a few more concrete examples. Anyways, Tim Moffat, that's where I'm at.